Hi everybody, and welcome to part 2 of today's video. The last move by white was knight from b3 to c5, and I posed the question here: what would happen if black were to play bishop to c5? Do you think it was a reasonable move, or do you think it was a blunder? Well, as it turns out, it is a blunder, and in a sense I was setting a trap for my opponent. When you've had your opponent cramped in for a while like this, psychologically it's always slightly freeing of some of the pressure if you're able to remove one piece, which will give you a bit more room to maneuver. And my opponent just sees the opportunity to capture this piece now, but he set himself up for some tactics which resulted in the loss of material. And it was really the decisive mistake in the game. So now we saw bishop takes c5, and now b takes c5. So the thing here is that we're threatening a couple of different things. First of all, we're attacking this knight, so the knight's really compelled to move, or black's going to lose some more material. But white now, since this dark squared bishop has been eliminated, this bishop can now come to the g5 square, hitting the queen and setting up the threat of bishop to f6 check. And since the dark squares have been weakened by this earlier g6 move, black is going to be losing some heavy material. So I'd seen all this ahead of time and kind of breathed a sigh of relief that I was probably going to win this game and win the tournament. So knight to c4 came. Actually, knight to d7 is slightly better because it can cover this f6 square, and black is still going to lose some material, but it's not as bad as knight to c4. So I immediately followed up with bishop to g5, hitting the queen. He plays now queen to f8, and then came bishop to f6 check. And the next move from black is just forced, is rook to g7. And now, when I'd calculated ahead in this game and seen the this continuation, I'd immediately thought of bishop takes g7 check, and knew that I was going to be winning at least the exchange. But having arrived at this position, it occurred to me that it might be better just to leave the bishop on this beautiful square. I mean, clearly this bishop of white, controlling all these weakened dark squares, is better than either of the black rooks, so why exchange it? It's better from a psychological point of view just to keep your opponent under pressure, that he has to keep worrying about the possible tactics that can emerge. So I followed up now with knight g5, and this is a nice move, a nice technical move, which is just, when you're going to attack your opponent, you want as many pieces as possible in the vicinity of your opponent's king. And now, because these pieces are so far out of play, for example, this knight on a7 can't really participate in the defense, and nor can really this rook or bishop. The bishop is penned in by his own pawns, and the rook can't really get in there to defend these squares because this pawn is kind of like blocking him out. So he plays knight 6. He's trying to re-centralize his pieces, which is a reasonably good idea. And now I just played the move queen h6, hoping to provoke another mistake from my opponent. And now we see just the final flourish here, that really where the game is over. My opponent here needed to play the move king to g8, breaking the pin and taking away the mate threat The immediate threat here is queen takes h7 mate. Because the rook is pinned, he can't move to take the queen. Instead, though, he tried to cut off the attack by playing h5. And h5 is actually a serious blunder. And I'd encourage you here just to practice your attacking technique and see if you can find the combination, a combination that puts the win beyond any doubt whatsoever. Okay, well, I hope you saw this move. It was a very nice move to find over the board, and that was bishop takes g6. Rook takes g6 is not possible because, again, the rook is pinned. The king cannot afford. Black cannot just ignore this, or knight to f7 is going to finish the game off very quickly. Or actually just queen takes h5. It's going to be mate in a couple of moves. So this next move is forced, and now knight takes e6, and this is the key point. We're applying more pressure to this g7 point, and this kind of affirms that it was the correct decision to leave the pin on the rook, and we found a way to break through, win some additional material and keep the pressure on this point and setting up some mate threats. So he basically has to move the queen now, and now knight takes g7 is the best move because it's setting up some more dangerous threats here. Basically moving the queen, moving the knight and revealing the check is very dangerous for black. So he's kind of forced to move his king to g8 here. I played now rook to d1, so I'm just stifling any kind of counterplay here. Probably rook c to d1 was better, and for some reason I didn't think about that at the time, but looking back it would have been better. And if white wants to, he may just aim to get queen to e6 to take the queens off and put the win beyond any doubt, when it would be like a solid material advantage. It would just be a matter of technique to finish. But I didn't really want to do that, so my opponent plays rook a8, and he's just trying his best to get something going on the queen side, but this is much too slow here. I played queen g3, and basically my idea is to get my queen into the g5 square, then h6, and see if we can set up some mate threats. So, and it's also setting up a tactic, knight takes h5, where g takes h5 is not possible because of this pin along the g file. However, I decided not to take this and thought that it would be better, since this knight is controlling some squares here that prevent the queen from using those squares. I would just leave the knight there and instead move the queen into a more dominant position to set up some mating attacks. So bishop g4, just hitting the rook. I played f3, so just to push that bishop back away. And now queen to h6, and we'll see the final flourish of the game here. The dangerous threats that are coming are a result of, if the knight moves away now, I'm threatening to come into h8 with mate, and my opponent, who was probably, you know, on a downward spiral here, missed this idea and played knight to d8. So he's just trying to get his knight over into a position where it can help, but this is actually a fatal blunder and loses on the spot, and I wonder if you can find out why. Okay, so the winning move is knight to f5, and this wins at least the queen, and I think it's a mate in 5 or something like that. Basically, we're setting up queen h8 mate. Any kind of capture of the knight is going to result in mate. So black is forced to play queen to h7. It's the only way to prevent mate immediately. And then knight to e7, checking the king and winning the game, because now the king is forced away from the defense of the queen, and queen takes e7 obviously is losing. So my opponent moved the king, and after queen takes h7, my opponent resigned. I hope you enjoyed this overview of this game and saw the power of a space advantage and how that can be an effective springboard for an attack. I hope to see you next time on YouTube. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye.